Today, we're sitting and visiting with Pat Lozier. Pat has been a member at Hope United Methodist Church for over 40 years now. Our records show that you joined the church January 30, 1983. So that's just turned 40 years ago.
Right.
Can you tell me what you remember about the first time you heard about this church?
I can. I had moved out here and had been looking around at different churches. And at my school, which was Willow Creek Elementary, not far from here, one of the third grade teachers, she said, "How's your search going?" And I said, "Okay." I said, "I've been back to a couple places." Um, she says, "We're looking at Methodist, right?" I said, "Yes." She says, "Well, why don't you meet me Sunday and we'll go where I go if you haven't been there yet." And I hadn't. So we came here together. And at that time, people were unstacking the brown chairs in Fellowship Hall because that's where they set up for worship. And there was a wall at the partway down this hallway. There was nothing further at that time. And people were very friendly when I came. Not that the other places weren't, but it just seemed noticeably a little bit more warmth to it. So that's how I came here the first time, was with a colleague from my school.
And were you a Methodist all your life?
Yes, yes.
Grew up in the
Mom,
Methodist
dad,
church?
my sister and I.
This was essentially an all-purpose building, what we call Fellowship Hall,
Right,
was it.
right,
And you're right, they had a little bit of a platform where they had two or three risers for the choir, but everything else was open.
right.
And you had to bring
You
in
had to
chairs and
set up and then take down, and but everybody pitched in, and it was like, as I watched them, it was like no big deal. So Bev and I joined in on that as well.
And was this similar sized church to what you grew up in or you were used to?
At that time, probably similar. Now, much bigger than what we were used to. Yeah.
Well, in those days, Al Brown was the pastor. Do you remember Al Brown?
I remember him very well.
Tell
And
us
I
what you
remember Victor Schultz.
Yes, they were a pair.
And his wife was Ruth,
Ruth.
I think.
That's correct.
Very nice people. No, I remember Al Brown. I can't tell you a particular moment with him, but I enjoyed him. I enjoyed when he would give the message. And it was really exciting when a few years down the road we were moving into the new sanctuary.
Yes.
And it was fun to see him smiling real wide on that first Sunday in there.
Well,
We all were, you know?
yes, that's true. He led a big fundraising to build the sanctuary that we use today. And so part of his pastorship here was helping us get the money together
Exactly.
so we could expand and do it. And the church was growing. We were adding people every year.
That's right.
You know, it was really fun.
Hmm.
But tell me what you remember about Victor Schultz.
Oh, he was just a gem, you know, just he was quiet, but there was something about him that you felt he had some humor. And he and Ruth, they were just very easy to speak with and talk to.
And you had some interaction with Ruth?
Just conversations. No, I had nothing in particular as far as any activities with her, but
Tell us what you remember about moving into the new sanctuary. That happened in 1984.
right. Well, for one thing, it was kind of cute. Different people were saying, and we don't have to set up the chairs anymore.
That's right.
And, you know, everybody was eager to see the carpet and just how things were laid out with the pews. And I remember liking all the woodwork up on the ceiling. I still like that.
Yeah.
And so we were pretty jazzed up, I think, that what we had been saving and raising money for and thinking about and singing sketches ahead of time was actually coming to fruition.
right? Yeah, that all-purpose building, if you wanted to have a luncheon, you had to take all the chairs out, and bring in tables, and then put
Exactly.
other chairs, folding chairs around.
Exactly. And I remember the first kitchen was quite narrow and tiny, but it was a place to have a refrigerator and be able to store food and whatnot. And then down the road, when they were able to think about the current kitchen, what a big change there
Oh,
too,
my.
right?
Some people I've interviewed referred to that first kitchen as a closet. It
I
was pretty
suppose so.
small
Hmm.
and hardly any room to do any real kitchen work,
Right,
refrigerator.
right.
No. Well, after Al Brown and Victor Schult were here, Dr. Vickery came, was a senior pastor. Do you remember Dr. Vickery?
I remember him, and I remember him, at least initially, I felt like he was a little bit more stern in his affect, but over time, I quite liked his messages. He was very orderly about first, second, third.
Yes.
And I'm a Peanuts fan, and I was quite taken one day when he brought up Charlie Brown and a particular cartoon that illustrated part of his message. It just didn't seem to fit with his outward demeanor, at least how I knew him at first. And then over time, I think he loosened up some.
Many people have said he was pretty formal,
Very formal.
particularly compared to Al Brown, who was
Mhm.
very folksy or
Hmm.
gregarious, if you
Mhm.
would, and it was a contrast in their personalities.
Yes, yes.
Lois Schugert was an associate pastor. Do you remember Lois?
I remember her just vaguely. I didn't know her well, but I do remember her. And I don't think she was here too long.
3 years.
3 years, okay.
After Dr. Vickery was here, Sam Day came to be the senior pastor. You remember him, of
I
course?
remember Sam Day. In fact, when I was thinking about various people, um, it was somewhere during Sam Day's time that I was asked, they were having to fill in a few usher teams that had some vacancies. So it was somewhere in Sam Day's time that I first joined an usher team. And I'm still doing one.
Yeah, so he was here 90 to 95, so that's been 23 plus 5,
But as I
28
recall,
or
he
30
was
years.
very, very well liked.
Yeah.
He just had I think, an easygoing manner. I liked all of his sermons. I think he delivered a message very well.
And Richard Lyon was the associate pastor. Do you remember him?
A little bit. Not I don't remember him too much, but I remember him a little bit.
And following Sam Day, Margaret Hankins
Yes.
came to be a co-pastor,
Hmm.
and she was the first senior or co-pastor in leadership role that was a female.
Yes.
Did you have any qualms about that?
I did not at all. I enjoyed her when she first came and as she continued to be a part of our church. And I think she was here as a guest speaker at one point, wasn't she?
Yes, she was the district superintendent
Right.
before she was assigned
And she
to
would
this
make the
church.
rounds different times, and we would know, next month they would say Margaret Hankins would be here to preach, and that was kind of special to have her.
Yeah. She wasn't well known, but she was a familiar face because
Yes.
she was here as the district superintendent.
Right.
And she took a co-pastorship with John Lee. So we had two
Mhm.
senior pastors at that time.
I remember John.
Yeah. And you remember much about him?
He was I thought very easygoing and friendly. You could strike up a conversation with him. I thought the two of them did well together.
I agree. A lot of people had qualms because usually you have a senior pastor and associate, sometimes with different experience
Mhm.
levels, but they both came in to take co-leadership and I think they made it work.
I do too. I thought they worked very well together. He had a nice sense of humor. She did too,
Yes.
actually.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, Margaret was loved, I think, by most everyone.
I think so.
After John Lee left, Steve Miller came and was a co-pastor with Margaret for a while. Do you
Yes.
remember Steve?
I sure do. And I've enjoyed when he has come back, not necessarily for the reason he came back, which sometimes was a memorial service,
Right.
but it was nice to see him after some years. But he had a sense of humor. We've had a lot of people
Yeah.
with a good sense of humor, and I think it lends itself well to the congregation to see people can deliver very important messages, but it doesn't have to be stiff.
Yes. And maybe not in a condescending manner, but very much on an equal level with the congregation.
Right, right.
You know.
Mhm.
When Steve and Margaret were here, Deb Juarez came as the youth pastor and associate pastor. Remember Deb Juarez?
I do. I do. I miss her. Um, I think, we've been very fortunate and spoiled in a way to have the longevity of Kate Stapleton with the young
Amen.
kids. Those families may have been told who didn't know how long she has been here, but I'm grateful for the young kids to have had that longevity. And if my memory is right, and it could be dusty, um, Deborah was very consistent with her age of the middle schoolers and high schoolers. And then once she went on, we've had much more short term situations. And I'm hoping soon that we can have maybe more longevity for those older kids in middle school and high school, particularly now. There's a lot of youth that are, I think, just trying to find their way, and that's partly COVID time and
Yes.
being in school and being out of school. And I think having somebody that could anchor them weekly would be great. And we've had that. It's just not been able to be long term.
Yes. And Deb was here for 14 years.
Yes.
So she was very consistent
She
over that
was.
period
That's
of
right.
time.
That's
When
right.
I was young, and probably you were in the same boat, nobody had football and gymnastics and soccer and baseball on Sunday. Sunday was reserved for going to the church.
It was.
Now these kids have.
Now Sundays have been robbed
It's just
for
amazing.
the sports and whatnot. And while you want the kids to have those things if they're interested in it, and some of them really thrive on that, that's their place to shine. I know a lot of my friends, we've talked about how Sundays have kind of been obliterated by the sports world.
We find that with our grandchildren, that they'll have a gymnastics meet 8 a.m. on Sunday
Yes.
morning. And we want to go, obviously, to be with our granddaughter,
Mhm.
but we also want to be at church.
Exactly.
So it's difficult for young people, I think, to have that consistency when their spiritual lives are essentially forming.
Exactly right. I remember at school, and I was in elementary school as a teacher, and different kids would come up and say, "We're having a swim meet on Sunday. Could you come?"
Yeah.
And you hated to just flat out say no,
Right?
but I worked out something I could say if it wasn't a Saturday. But it just illustrates more what we're sharing, and that is how sports really took and put a hole in a Sunday routine for the families who had one.
Yes,
And quite a few had a
Yep.
routine with that.
certainly have.
Hmm.
It's a new world in many ways.
It is.
For a year then, after Steve Miller and Margaret Hankins left, church was a little bit uneasy or not sure how things were going to work.
Hmm.
And Dale Beck came as an interim
Mhm.
pastor. Do you remember Dale Beck?
I remember Dale Beck. I continue to be very grateful that he he was, I think, periodically asked to come out of retirement, not just for us, but other places. And I remember when he came, um, he had just returned from a road trip. I think his mother had passed away. And he was in another state, he and his wife, dealing with that funeral and whatnot. And then he came in here, and the very next Sunday gave his first message to us. Then, a year later, his very last day was telling us they had lost their home in the
That's right.
fires up at Estes Park. And I thought, the way he was dealing with those things was very, he could have been falling apart and nobody would have blamed him.
Of course.
But he was very just focused, and he said, can't remember his wife's first name, but he said, we talked yesterday that we should just come today as planned because there wasn't much else we could do. The house was gone. We were staying in a hotel down here just to cut the driving. And so he says, a lot of you have come up and been very kind, expressing your concern about what happened. And kind of saying, you didn't have to be here. And he thought, where else would we go today? There's really not much. And we were having his thank you and goodbye reception that day.
I remember that Sunday. It was very touching.
It was. It was. I liked him so much. And then once he left, he did say, watch your bulletin periodically. He said, up there at Estes, he would take a group on a hike on a Sunday. And we would be informed periodically when he wanted us specifically to be a part of that.
Okay.
And I remember going up there with Wanda. I don't know if you remember Wanda Ramey.
Yes.
And we went on a couple of his Sunday hikes, and he'd have his folk guitar in a cover, and we'd hike, and then we'd stop and we'd do a reading and then discuss the reading of the scripture. Then we'd hike on, and then we'd sing. And it was, to be outdoors. And of course, with them living up there, he knew some of the better trails. And
Right. Well, that's a wonderful memory.
oh,
Dale
it was fun. Yeah,
Beckett.
I enjoyed him very much.
After Dale left, Steve Warren came and was the senior pastor here. Do you remember Steve
I
Warren?
remember Steve.
Yeah. Tell me about those memories.
I felt a little bit of distance with him. And that could be me. I just recall he sometimes was a little frustrated with the ushers because we would receive messages from people nicely, and then we would try to present that to him, one of which was for quite a while he had the altar railing down. And when people went down front for communion, for some people it was, once they were down and on a cushion, they were fine, but getting down and then standing up got to be a little bit difficult. But it seemed that no matter who approached him or who was willing to try to share one thing or another, I don't know if he felt like we were overboard with concerns, but anyway, no, I do remember him. I think he was here 5 to 6 years, maybe 6.
Yes, 6 years. And it was interesting because he graduated from Cherry Creek High School.
Oh, did he?
Which is 2 blocks away.
Yes, right.
During that same time, Kathy Smith and Marla Cowers were here. Do you remember those ladies?
I don't remember Kathy Smith. I remember Marla Cowers. In fact, I had taken a couple of her Bible study classes that we held across the hall in Fellowship Hall. And I quite liked our discussions that we would have. I remember her husband, Skip.
Yes.
They were, I think, quite liked here. And but I don't remember Kathy Smith.
She worked mostly with the children, I think, in children's education.
Okay, that might be,
And of course, after Steve Warren, Don Bird came as the senior pastor.
Mhm.
Remember Don, of course?
I do remember Don, and I remember, I think Roger Dowell and his wife had an evening meeting for people who, I think we were having different evening meetings to introduce Don and his family.
Yes.
And I live in Highlands Ranch, and at the time, Roger Dowell and his wife did also. And I remember meeting Don and his family at their home one evening. And to think now, Ethan's out of college, and it's just amazing. You know, they were young kids when we first met them.
Yes, they were. And he was here for 6 years.
Yes, he was. And I quite liked the family very much. Mandy, very friendly, and I recently saw them for Eli's
Oh,
service.
yes. He was
Mhm.
here for them.
Yes, Pastor Claire was here, and Don Bird was here, and I was out in the hall because I was going to be helping to usher, and he came over and gave me a hug, and Mandy did too, and very nice family.
I agree. Also, associate pastor during some of the time Don Bird was here was Stephanie Price.
Yes,
Remember Stephanie?
I do.
Tell me her memories.
In fact, I had put down some things about the land.
Yes.
We all knew she was interested, and she was part-time with that, part-time here. And I would attend on occasion. I wasn't all that excited in the summer about reptile
Yes.
situations, but you know, I was just one of those who thought, good, I'll wear my hiking boots and my long jeans, and that's okay. And it was fun to watch her work so hard in developing the land. And I remember, I think we had our first canopy out there when we had one of those snowstorms they call something cyclone bomb, whatever.
Yes.
And out there it was always windy, always windy. And I remember it knocked that thing flat. And she had been in touch with people that, for the most part, it was in good shape. There was one brace on one corner that would have to be fixed. And before that got taken care of, some people had come by and they had taken all the metal supports. And that's when we had the canopy closer to the parking lot and the road. And it was that caused it to be moved way back, thinking it would deter perhaps that happening again.
Right.
But different times being a greeter out there. I didn't get there every Saturday, but I tried to get there at least twice a month. And I remember the hard work Clyde Oakley was doing with, I think, somebody in the agriculture program up in Boulder about preparing the plots of ground. Depending on what vegetables were going where, we were to use a certain topsoil. And then on another one, we were to mix some of that with the soil that came out. And I remember many wheelbarrows of soil and dumping them, and then thinking, why didn't I wear my back support, my wraparound back support for my lower back? Why didn't I do that? But Stephanie was one to really be admired for her, I think, work ethic and her ability. I mean, she's tiny.
Yes.
But she's no pushover when it comes to the kinds of work they were doing out there. Physical work, all kinds of weather. So yes, I remember Stephanie very well. And I also remember John Clark standing up and reading the letter about Don Bird was being tapped for filling a retirement as we all did, to be a very mixed up turmoil. But when I came to that, I just felt very settled here and seeing people that I hadn't seen in quite some
Yes.
time. I will always be grateful to Rev Lynn for that. Likewise, her touching base with Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah.
I wish I were 10 years younger to do some of the things, but now I'm wearing my wraparound lower back support, and I've truly enjoyed interacting with Habitat and learning more about that program. And my first foray into that was through any of the arrangements Rev Lynn made.
Yes. And she and Brian have been active in that
They
for
have
some time.
been.
Her spouse. Yes.
Yes.
Tell me about your interaction with Rev Ken.
I get a kick out of him. I think he's very humble, even though he will say
Yes.
he'll say the opposite, like last night. And I think even a Sunday or two ago, he was talking about ego or he knows he needs to slow down, and he'll share what Amanda will say, that he was a monster on Facebook.
I thought that was interesting.
And even though he can joke around like that, I never feel like he goes too far on that. He does enough to relate to people, and I'm sure he'll be very eager to have his ordination and everything of that finished up and behind him. It's been fun to watch Grace.
Grace. Your daughter.
Amanda Chase, Grace, and how they work with her on various things at that age. And I guess the children's message was following rules last Sunday, I
Yes.
think. And he talked about, well, we have a new rule at our house, and it's about Grace. She can't put her shoe in her mouth.
And the pleasures of a 2-year-old.
Yes. And I just think he probably can reach certain people that maybe other people can't, just because of that humor level. He certainly likes his sports,
Yes.
mainly only for Texas teams, but he likes that, and I think he uses it to his benefit quite well. Mhm.
With your experience here over 40 years, we've seen a lot of pastors with different talents and different skills and different personalities. What would you like to see in the next senior pastor?
I feel we've been fortunate. I think we've been very fortunate to have people who are well spoken. They may present their material a little differently, but I think they provide really good learning for us. And I just keep wondering how often we can go to the well and have another good person. But I'm sure in that field there are many, many good people, and I just hope we can be fortunate again. I would rather not have this quick of a turnover. I mean, with Pastor Claire, I fully understood and supported her when this was going to be closed anyway, and her doctors were talking to her about, this might be the time not to be in charge of something big like a church and focus more on your recovery. You're making good progress, but this could be a right timing for you. Totally understood that. And then when Rev Lynn came in, and again, Paul, I think, was a good transitionist to help her when there was nobody in the building.
Right.
And I think Paul was instrumental in helping guide that to get started. And So I don't know. I
Pieces
hope
and
parts
we
of
can
a lot
have-
of these people.
Right.
We've got a lot of people who have good sense of humor. We've had a lot of people who are well educated in their ministry. We have a lot of people who value families and want to try to build up young families coming into our church,
Right.
since we're pretty much an aging congregation. So I hope we can find that we'll have pieces and parts to whoever comes in that will remind us of people before them. Because I think the traits we've seen in most of those people have been wonderful.
Well, Pat, you told us about your decades of service on the usher team. Are there other things you've been involved with here at Hope?
Yes. Yes. I mentioned the Bible studies with Marla Cowers. I've mentioned the time with Habitat.
Yes.
This next one is more informal, but there was a time when the front garden out here kind of had gotten icky. And Wanda Ramey said to me, would you work with me maybe once every couple of weeks? And I want to try to bring this back. I want to put some new plants in, the ones that are no longer alive and breathing.
Right.
We'll just take those out. I said, sure. So enjoyed doing that. I think the what John used to do with Christmas and the
Yes.
Coalition for the Homeless.
Yes.
All those many years, people adopting families. The families would meet with their caseworker. We'd learn what the 11-year-old might be happy with out of these 3 things, pick something. I just enjoyed that so much. And I was still teaching in the front end of that. And I could basically only help John on the Sunday before when he said, bring everything wrapped. And I would make sure the number was on it and I'd take it downstairs to L1 along the perimeter
Yes.
in order. And then when I retired, I could really, really help. And that was, I could be one of the drivers when it was the day to drive everything to the coalition. I could help oversee one of the 2 rooms, either the kids wrapping for their parents or the parents were wrapping for their kids. That was so meaningful. And it just really was wonderful. And let's see. Oh, our music department. I've always enjoyed music. I was never one to be in a church choir, but I've always loved music. I played flute through school. And I mean, I keep thinking, where can you go where you have a choir, a handbell group, people who are willing to do solos or duets. I think of, again, the Laumans. I think of Clyde. He'll do solos. He'll be up there with Vern. We're just so, and Roland, Red Sea Band.
Yes. With the
And
youth.
there is an opportunity for those middle schoolers.
Great.
And for those who have chosen to be in her Red Sea Band for whatever length of time, whether it's a year or 2 years, I think those kids are really receiving not just the musical part, but Anne has something that she gives.
This church has been known for its music program.
Yes,
for
it
years,
has.
and we've
It has.
been blessed.
And I'm thinking, again, how long can you have that? And may we keep it, please.
Amen.
You know, I remember Ted Loveland
Yes.
when we got this organ new partway through his time. He was like a little kid at Christmas. Oh, he couldn't wait for that to come, you know. And
I remember Ted loving that instrument because he could play and it would record it.
yes,
And then he could sing
yes,
to his own accompaniment.
yes,
It was just
absolutely.
amazing.
Yes, Yes, he was
And
like,
Cheryl Saborski, of course, is just
I mean,
talented beyond amazing.
isn't it the truth? I mean, and I think for the most part, our different choir directors um, have been so talented, and different organists. And how fortunate are we that we had Ted as long as we had him, and then Cheryl now, other people previous.
Yes.
But this is like a house of music,
I agree.
and I think it adds so much. I would say that was one thing I really missed at the land, even though,
Yeah.
you know, Clyde would often bring his guitar and he'd sing. I think the last time when I was out there for Stephanie's last preaching day, there were a couple people playing violin. Somebody else was playing a wind instrument. Somebody was playing guitar. So they've made it work to have music.
Spoiled
I
little
just
me.
missed it.
That's okay.
But I do. I just think music lends itself in my head for just centering yourself for the beginning of a new week and taking in the message, and then the music part just supports it all. Even last night, I loved the hymns they had
I
last
did too.
night.
That was very nice.
So
We've talked about a lot of things that you've been involved in that you've benefited from. Can you tell us about this church's involvement in your spiritual journey over the last 40 years?
well, I think it has been instrumental. I mean, the fact that I wanted to keep coming, I have a lot of long-term friendships here, and I think it just suited me here. It always felt welcoming, and periodic participation. I wouldn't say heavy participation, but periodic participation in some Bible studies, um, various evenings that were geared towards some special topic. Um, I just think I've grown to some extent about wanting to have a life at church. I find it is a way to be grounded as we get ready to enter a new week. There were different times at school. It might have been close to conference time and just extra work getting ready for parent-teacher conferences. And you were already starting to feel tired before that week even came. I'd come here on Sunday and just, I could leave all that and just focus on the music, the singing, the messages. So I don't know that I can describe any major depth, like, well, now I'm going to go to Iliff,
Sure.
sign up.
Sure.
But I've enjoyed what we've been given, and I think we've been given a lot here
You stated
through
that very well.
through our pastors and through the congregation, different people in the congregation stepping up to do one thing or another. And that just matters to me. I've always had my school population, fellow teachers, families. Then this was another family on Sundays. And I guess it was good I wasn't playing soccer or any of that anymore, because I got here on Sunday. So
We're glad that you did.
well, I am too.
Tell me about your thoughts on the current dispute in the United Methodist Church.
You know, it makes me sad. It makes me sad. It seems to go against what for years in Sunday school, growing up in New York State, we went to Sunday school and church, and there was just always this sense of, you may not be happy with everything, but you need to try to get along. And then when I see this major cavernous split with what I get the sense of is it can get pretty acrimonious.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, some things aren't my cup of tea either, but I don't think we have to get so vehement about it. And to me, the church life, a religious life, shouldn't be so contentious. I mean, there's bound to be things, but I think this potential split and some splits that have already taken place, I almost want to say, what are you accomplishing? What feels good to you about this? Because I don't know. I just don't. I just finished my third year on the All Church Council. My last meeting was December, and I remember back, I don't know, was it September? Revlin said that Church Council would have to do a vote for the first round,
Yes.
and unless we're at odds in a big way, she would just make an announcement at church how the vote went, and we were unanimous to hang in there. And we didn't need to bring it into the congregation and then have who knows what that would look like, and nothing with the congregation. It's just it was good that I think we were all pretty much of the same thoughts. And I don't know. I'm hoping there can be some resolution for this to stop.
Yes.
And the people who have split, if they want to remain split, so be it. But I'm hoping we don't continue to have these voting sessions and then more people split, and it's just sad to me that places of worship, thinking about God, what he's trying to guide us to, has to turn into kind of a free-for-all issue. So I know a lot of my friends here or outside of church, at their churches, they're going through the same thing, and they feel the same way. They're hoping that this won't become so contentious to be damaging.
Right.
Because some of those things you never get past. Or some people get past it, but not everybody gets past it. They harbor resentment. And I don't see that fits with God's view of the world and what he was hoping for us.
Yes. Well said. Thank you. We've been here for 40 years and you've watched a lot of different things happen. What would you like to see Hope Church do in the next 40 years?
I'd like to see our program build back up with young families. And along with that, maybe some, not maybe, along with having young families come in, the current Kids with Kate, I'm hoping they can grow into a programming that kind of like we were very fortunate with Deborah to be here the 14 years. And you can establish some things with that age. And I think that age is hard.
It is.
And I think it's become harder under all the craziness of COVID, and we're in school, we're out of school, we're at the home, we're in front of the computer, we're not in front of the computer. It's crazy. And I just would like to see us be as fortunate as we've been to have very good leadership with our pastors and participation with our congregation. I know just when I think we're slowly building up successfully some attendance, then it feels like we skid backwards a little. But maybe that's just 2 weeks, and then it feels like, no, we got back to here again. And so I hope we can build up our attendance with any and all, singles, families, young kids, babies, 18-year-olds, but come back to where we once, I think, were, with a vibrancy of wanting to make ourselves, all of us, grow in our faith, grow as people.
Thank you.
Well, thank
Well, we
you.
talked about a lot of people and a lot of activities. Have we
Mhm.
left any memories out or people that?
Not
you
to my
included?
knowledge. Maybe when I'm driving home, I'll think of something, but it is quite interesting to not be looking back on 3 years, but looking back on 40. And I wish I were, again, younger, but sometimes if I were younger, I wouldn't have the same perspective as now, which could be good and not so good. All depends. I'll always be not really into the reptiles out of the land, but I won't hurt any of them. I
I'll
just,
join you on that one.
oh my goodness.
Pat, thank you for sitting for
Thank
this
you.
interview.
Thank you. I hope it satisfied what you're looking for.
Absolutely. We're making a record of people's memories.
Mhm. Well, and I want to say thank you to you because when I'm ushering in the back or seated by Nancy Duncan, doesn't matter, watching you go around with your camera down front with the kids. I remember when Cricket came with her little dog, and she had planned with Stephanie Price to have a little dog in a bag, and the kids wouldn't know it, but that was going to be children's message that day. And it was delightful to see the kids just, when Cricket brought the little dog out, it was just fun. So, there's been a lot of good things.
I agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.